When I was 18, in 2005, my mom was giving me a ride to work. My car had got impounded for something stupid, and I had to wait 30 days to get it back. On Saturdays, I worked morning shift, so I had to be at work by 5 a.m. That means we had to leave the house no later than 4:30. It was still dark outside, like pitch black and very cold. That morning, as my mom drove me to work, from a distance, I could see a figure getting ready to cross the road, basically jaywalk in front of us. As we got closer, I could see it was a young girl. I thought to myself, damn, caught her doing the walk of shame. She had no shoes, a long white shirt like if she was wearing a man's white tee. It was big on her. It looked like she had no pants on, but you could barely see that she did. Short jean shorts peeked onto the bottom of the shirt, like the kind that used to be pants, but she cut herself. She wasn't wearing shoes. My mom started talking shit in Spanish, like what kind of girl walks around the streets at this hour dressed like that? She was walking now in the middle of the street, super slow, to the point my mom had to stop like 10 feet away because she was blocking us. When my mom stopped, the girl went completely still. She was facing from our right to left. As we now were close, I could see her skin was a really bluish gray, and her hair was black. It looked wet and tangled, like she just got out of the shower. My mom was about to honk at her when she slowly turns her head to look right at us. Her hair was covering her face. She looked like the girl from The Ring. The part that I'll never forget was that she moved her hair out of the way, and she had no face. Nothing. It was smooth, like Slender Man. No eyes, no mouth, no nose. Just smooth. My mom started to have a panic attack. I literally felt my heart drop. The girl looked at us for like 2 to 3 seconds, then took off running. I never saw anything like that in my life. Till this day, my mom and I can't explain what that was. I guess I was sharing my story in hopes that maybe someone else had seen something similar. Something with no face. Approximately 3 years ago, my spouse and I engaged in some casual home searching. Although we weren't in a position to afford a property at that time, we wanted to familiarize ourselves with the market for future reference. While exploring a pleasant neighborhood, we stumbled upon a potentially stunning 2-story house that appeared to be undergoing construction. The property boasted a generous size, and the house itself was around 75% complete. Although all the walls were present, there were no interior walls or paint, and the plumbing and electric systems were installed. Curiosity got the better of us, so we decided to call the real estate number provided to inquire about a possible tour. To our surprise, the agent encouraged us to explore the premises on our own. Strangely enough, there were no doors or fences restricting access. As my wife and I started making our way toward the house, a sudden wave of fear washed over me. I hastily retreated to the truck and took a seat. From my vantage point, I noticed something that hadn't been there before. 2 children and a middle-aged woman leaning out of the previously empty window frames. They seemed to be reaching out between the windows. And then it became clear to me. There was a fire engulfing the top portion of the house. The image wasn't entirely distinct, but there was no mistaking it. Those individuals were trapped inside. Alarmed by what I had witnessed, I urgently instructed my wife to leave the vicinity immediately. I was so shaken up that she took over driving duties as we made our swift exit. As we drove away from the scene, I distinctly heard screams emanating from the direction of the burning house. Strangely enough, my wife hadn't seen anything out of the ordinary. She mentioned that while observing me gaze at the house, she could clearly sense that I had witnessed something. Additionally, she recalled hearing what seemed like a scream, but dismissed it as the sound of a tire screeching. A few days later, I made the decision to reach out to my cousin who was employed by the fire department. I inquired if he had access to property histories through his role in the information office. Without divulging any details about my own experience, he managed to retrieve the file pertaining to that specific address. The records revealed that the house had suffered extensive fire damage a decade earlier, resulting in the tragic demise of the entire family. In light of this information, he advised against considering it as a sound investment. To this very day, I have actively avoided driving past that house again. So my grandma used to live in a 4-story high flat. She was on the top floor. She lived there for 50 plus years. The whole building is 100 plus years old. When my mom was a little girl, she experienced a lot of creepy shit. She told me this particular story as I grew a bit older that really stuck with me all these years. One night, while she was sleeping in bed with her little sister, they shared a room. She looked over to the door and saw a man standing in the shadows. Full of fear, she froze and didn't know what to do. She just stared at this man and decided to wake her sister up while having her eyes fixed on him. Her sister woke up and began to cry after seeing him too. When her parents came in the room, the man was gone. Another thing my mom told me was that beside the garden door on the bottom floor, there was a little indoor storage area where all residents of the flat could store their bikes, scooters, etc. My mom told me not to go into it. She legit told me it's haunted and to stay away from it. I never went close to it. In fact, I remember every time I had to go up to my grand's by myself, I would feel an eerie feeling coming from that little compartment, and I would sprint up the stairs, and then I would feel like I was being followed. Anyway, that's just some backstory of this house. Now, when I was 14 years old, myself, my brothers, and my cousins, we all used to go over to my grand's quite regularly. And back then, we never had phones or anything, so we used to play games like hide and seek, What's the Time, Mr. Wolf, etc. One day, it was just me and one of my cousins. He was around 11. All the adults used to sit in the living room, and they used to tell us to go play. So my cousin and I decided to play hide and seek. I tell him that I'll seek and he hides. He agrees and goes to hide. I face the wall and begin to count down. When I finish, I go look for him. I start by the kitchen. He's not there. I go to the bedroom, not there. Then I go to my grandparents' bedroom. Inside the bedroom, they had this closet. It was more like a small room, plenty of space in there for like 4 people. This is where they stored a bunch of blankets and old traditional furniture. As I entered the bedroom, to my surprise, he jumps out from this closet, with both his hands on his throat, crisscrossing each other. He's looking pale and blue. What he says next, I will never forget. He says, "Why did you strangle me?" My first instinct was to call him a dumbass and say, "I didn't." Then he says, "You got behind me and started strangling me. I saw your face." This sent shivers down my spine. Now, in my head, I'm thinking, how could I have just teleported in front of you if I was right behind you a second ago? It would just be impossible. But being the older cousin, I could clearly sense the fear and distraught he was in. So to lighten the mood, I started to laugh and said, "Yeah, it was me. I was behind you. I hugged him, but honestly I was fucking shitting my pants. We stopped playing hide and seek after that. His mom was mad at me for strangling him, and I just took all the blame. I told my mom what happened when we left my grand's. She believed me and hugged me, and we kept it to ourselves. Many years down the line, I was like 21 and this cousin was about 18. I brought this story up, and he remembered clear as day exactly what had happened. We talked, and now that he was way older, he understood what had happened, and that it was completely impossible for me to be in front of him, but also behind him strangling him 1 second ago. He thanked me for giving him that comfort at that age, and telling him that it was me strangling him. He said for many years he believed it was me because I told him it was. He also said that if I didn't say it was me, he would have been paranoid for the rest of his life. He said as he grew older, he started to think about that day and started to realize there was no possible way that it could have been me if I had just come into the bedroom. Thankfully, that house has been sold. But as I grow older, there are moments when I feel the urge to drive by it again. Yet as I approach, a sense of unease creeps over me, and I find myself accelerating, desperate to escape its haunting grip. I was on a ferry for a school softball trip off Kodiak Island, Alaska, in 2014. I was 18. A whole bunch of us had snuck up to the deck around 11 p.m. to watch the waves and smoke cigarettes and weed, and generally be teenagers on a boat without supervision. So it was 11 p.m. in May in Alaska, so the sun was thinking about setting, but it was still pretty bright outside. We're just doing our thing and we notice a pod of orcas swimming with the ferry's wake, which is cool but not like unusual. If you're familiar with the dimensions of an orca fin, you know they're about 4 to 6 feet in height. They look like big black spikes coming out of the water. They travel and hunt in pods of anywhere between 15 to 40. Apex predators, the beautiful demon murderers of the sea. Total assholes, top of the food chain. So we saw a pod of orcas, counted them to be around 10 to 15, with some babies scattered in there. Very fun to watch. Took them a good 30 minutes to all go by. We tried to get pictures, but it was just dark enough that our shitty phone cameras weren't much good. Another 30 or 40 minutes go by, and we've all pretty much sobered up, and it's about to get dark, and we're cold and sleepy, and about ready to go in. No more orcas. Haven't seen one for like half an hour. And then one of the JV girls spots another one. So we all turn and look. But one dorsal fin is immediately followed by another, and another, and another, and then 2 more, and then 2 more after that, in 2 separate rows, and they're taller, by a lot, and jagged. Some have whole chunks torn out of them, and they're 8 to 10 feet high, and they're all attached to one creature. And we can just barely see its back slicing through the water, covered in these rows of spikes. And it just keeps coming. This thing is like 20 or 30 feet from the ferry, running parallel to it, and we are all transfixed. There's 9 or 10 of us, and no one is saying a word, because we've all turned to look at an orca, and we're all now watching something that is like horrifically, terrifyingly, obviously not an orca. We all stand there completely scared fucking stiff and in awe, and we watch this thing just keep surfacing for a good 6 or 7 minutes. Which means that whatever it was long, like 60 or 70 feet long, or longer, and covered in enormous spikes. Spikes that looked like they'd won thousands of battles with God knows what. It took what felt like an eternity for any of us to say anything after the last of it disappeared back into the strait. And it was very obviously trailing, or hunting not one, but 15-something apex fucking predators. What do you even say to break that silence? Every once in a while, one of us will hit another one of us up and check in like, do you remember this? Was I hallucinating? Did we all see the same insane, worldview-melting, terrifying thing that night? And the reason I know we did is because none of us talked about it after that. Not during the trip, not after, not to any of our friends. Because how the fuck do you even tell someone about something like that? I was supposed to get off my retail job at 10 p.m. and catch the first bus. My manager had me stay later, so I had to catch a late bus and change my route. The stop wasn't my usual spot, so I just sat to wait for the bus. I was texting my best friend and asking her to pick me up, because sometimes buses don't show or are late. She wasn't answering me, since she ended up working late too. And then I noticed my surroundings. I was just off of a main street, just south of several closed corner stores. I realized this bus bench was on the street nearest to a park that closes at sundown. There were no cars and no people. The street light near the bus stop was busted too. I immediately felt unnerved and trapped. Nothing was open, and nothing was nearby. A man was walking toward the bench I was waiting on. He was walking from the park. He would pass under a street lamp and be illuminated, and then disappear before being lit up by the next one. I felt my heart pounding in my chest. He came up behind the bench and didn't sit down next to me. He just stood behind the bench, slightly to my right. Then he started walking around the bench, just circling me. I called my friend and acted like she had answered, but instead I left a voicemail. Hey, you almost here? Yeah, I'm still here. I'll hop in as soon as you pull up. Do I want food? No, we had McDonald's last week. The dude kept circling me. I was too afraid to even look at his face. I hung up and put my phone away and realized I had my box cutter in my bag. I pulled it out and started playing with it, just pushing the blade in and out. He stopped circling me, and I finally looked at him and stood up. He turned and walked away. My friend actually pulled up soon after. We drove right past the guy who was still walking aimlessly. I bought a car about a week later, and I always drove my coworkers home if we worked late together and they needed a ride. So this is an experience I had in 2018 when I was a management trainee with an organization, and it entailed a short 1 or 2 week stint across their major offices in different cities. For my second stint, I was put in a city where I had never been before and had no friends or acquaintances, so the company booked a hotel close to the office premises. The room was rather big and seemed very luxurious, albeit a bit old and shabby. What stumped me the most was how economical it was. The first night was uneventful, and for a woman traveling alone for the first time, it felt secure and comfortable. The second night, at about 9:30 p.m., I ordered in, and after finishing my dinner, I went out of my door to place the food trolley for collection by the staff. Just when I turned around to close my door, I saw someone staring at me from the corner of my eye. The person was at the end of the corridor, and it was very dimly lit. Let me add here that only 2 out of the 20 rooms on the floor were occupied, and 10 were being renovated, hence the dim lighting at night. When I turned to look, the person ran out of view towards the elevator. I was creeped out and locked the room and reported this to the reception. Third night, I was talking to my mom on a video call and heard heavy pacing and running at about 10 or 10:30 p.m. My mom heard it too. I sneaked to the peephole and saw no one, but I heard the footsteps right outside my door. I called reception and they sent someone to check, who reported that there was no one, and I checked their CCTV footage. No one was there. Fourth night, I got a call on the hotel intercom, and when I answered, I heard only heavy breathing and low growling noises. This continued another 2 times before I called the reception again to raise a complaint. They checked their call panel records and said I had not received calls from any current hotel guest or staff lines. I checked again the next morning just to be sure, and they showed how the system is automated and no one can tamper with it. It showed no incoming or outgoing calls from my room. Fifth night, I heard a constant knocking on the wall behind the bed, and it moved across the room, basically to where I was standing. Now this creeped me out much more, and as someone diagnosed with hyperanxiety and depression, it felt like I was losing my mind and I had an anxiety attack. I ran out of my room to the reception, 2 floors below, and the manager on duty calmed me down. I was extremely upset. I questioned everyone around, and none of the staff said anything, and said it was strange such things were happening. Later, a woman from my hometown, who was currently employed there, accompanied me to a new room they assigned to me. She told me in private that the floor I was on was sealed for 5 years, and had recently been reopened. Rumor has it that some old hotel staff had molested a woman, and she was killed in the struggle. The administration covered it up and paid off the perpetrator and family of the victim and sold this property to the current owners. Since then, people have reported multiple occurrences on that floor. Also, these were the major events. Some other small things happened, like the feeling of being watched constantly, cold spots, and feelings of nausea and panic. I checked out promptly the next morning and got another hotel. I paid from my pocket, and have since then been extremely scared and anxious to be alone in any hotel room. My best friend in high school lived on a rural farm south of San Antonio, Texas. All private fenced-in land. His family had owned that land for generations and known every nook and cranny. As typical high school kids do, we had massive parties at this farm, since the cops wouldn't mess with us out there. He and I were also always riding around, hunting, fishing, shooting guns, and generally just hanging out on the property. One summer night, we're all just hanging out, shooting the shit, drinking beer around a fire, when we notice around 10 to 15 men dressed head to toe in all black clothing. Black beanie, black face paint, black sweatshirt, black pants, black boots. Just completely black everything. One of the men appeared to be wearing what looked like night vision goggles, but they were strange looking. We saw the first 3 men walking upright towards us, maybe 50 yards away, and then we started to see the other 7 to 10 guys crawling on their bellies toward us, out of a cornfield. My best friend, freaking out because people were trespassing on his family's land, went right up to one of the guys and started screaming and demanding to know what the hell they were doing there. Nothing. Complete silence. He kept berating and yelling at these men, and not one of them would even acknowledge us. That's when we started to get really creeped out, because in our high school brains, we immediately thought we were fucked, and the local cops had organized this huge sting operation to shut us down for having these massive parties. But these men were laser focused on something, and wouldn't even acknowledge our presence. They just kept marching northward, through very thick brush and more cornfields, until we couldn't see them anymore. To this day, we still talk about it and speculate what the fuck that was all about. The best theory we could come up with is that it was some sort of military training exercise or something. But his farm is nowhere near any military base or installation. After graduating undergrad, I was working as a caseworker for individuals with developmental disabilities and got assigned a new case for a young man who had autism and severe behavioral concerns. I met him at his grandmother's house. She had custody of him since his parents weren't around. I think Mom was in prison. Met this young man who was probably about 6 foot and weighing around 250 pounds, but had the developmental capacity of a 5-year-old child with a hairpin trigger temper. The house he was living in was absolutely destroyed. The only piece of furniture that wasn't smashed up was an oversized beanbag chair in the living room. Grandma gave up trying to send the kid to school, since he would absolutely destroy the place if he was forced to go. Grandma was no peach, but I felt for her and wanted to help. One of the meetings I was having with them, the kid and Grandma seemed especially tense, like pacing around the room and smacking the walls. After about an hour of trying to get stuff done and realizing that it was not going to happen on this trip, I decided to call it, since the kid was becoming more and more agitated. It happens in this line of work. Grandma was annoyed I would have to come back, but we scheduled for a week or so out, and I left my business card with a reminder of the appointment. I leave to go back to my home state for a few days, and when I get back, I get called into my supervisor's office. I guess the night I left, the kid had a complete breakdown and beat his grandmother to death. No one noticed until the kid came wandering outside after a day or two, covered in blood. I probably missed everything by less than 3 hours. Hey guys and ladies, thanks for watching. Links to all my shit are down in the description. So I don't think I'll have another video before 4th of July, I'm not sure. But if you're not going to be with your pets during the fireworks, you should lock them up in a bathroom or a room that they can't get out of. Because I don't want your dog to run away. Other than that, I love you guys. And be good to animals, even people. See ya.